The Hog Sty is brought to you by TicketClub.com, your one-stop shop for live events nationwide. Whether you're looking for game, theater, or live performance tickets, don't sweat it. TicketClub.com has you covered. So make sure you're going there for all your live entertainment needs, and make sure you're clicking over to them from the banner at the top of thehogsty.com.
It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and John Worrell. And now, here's your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business, the sports business podcast where we look at the industrial, sports, entertainment, media, business, industrial complex that runs the games we love. We're down to a two-man gang again this week as John is, on some couch somewhere with a water bottle on his head and ginger ale and ice by his side. But Steve, you are here. How are you?
See, we said last week, I don't know if you listened to last week's show, Chris, but we said you were out vicing somewhere. That was our best guess. John is not out vicing. I have a feeling John has no voice. Like, physically has no voice right now. So that's why he's not here. No, I'm doing fine. I'm just recovering. I watched every single moment of the Democratic debates, hang on every word this week. I didn't watch any of it. Sorry. I was watching soccer. No, I didn't do that either because soccer's just a horrible sport. I didn't watch either, I gotta say. The two biggest stories probably of the week, I intentionally boycotted both. One out of boredom, one out of disgust. So, which is normal, that's normal for me.
Yeah,
boredom and disgust.
That's what I would have predicted. No surprises there for long-time listeners.
I'm rooting against the U.S. national soccer team. I'm rooting against the United States for the first time ever, that I can ever remember in my life. I'm rooting against the United States. I hope they lose for the political reasons, which you would. I don't even think I need to say it for you to know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I'm aware, and quite frankly, none of it motivates me that much. Kind of just.
Well, that's the thing. It's soccer, and I don't care. I haven't watched a single second of it. I don't. To me, it's such a boring sport. I just can't do it. That's really what it is for me. I cannot watch 90 minutes of 1-0. I just can't.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, different strokes. If you like it, have at it. I have other things to do with my time.
Yeah, exactly. And the games are. Oh my God, the games are so. If anybody in pro soccer is listening, here's my recommendation. Okay, to make this more palatable to American audiences, shorten the games. 90 minutes is way too long. Number one, make it a 60-minute game. You gotta shrink the field, widen the goals, and get rid of that offsides penalty. All of that would serve to increase scoring. It would be more interesting. So if anybody from soccer is listening, that's the Steve Thomas recommendation, which nobody's going to care about, but that's what I would do.
But they're not too worried about it. The world is still a bigger market than the United States.
Yeah, but the United States is the only country that's important in the world, clearly, so.
Okay. Well, with that...
I alienated our international audience.
Yeah, that's right.
Well.
And just denigrated global markets. All right, well, with that...
Par for the course, man. Par for the course.
Stay on brand. So, with that, we will transition into a uniquely American game and talk about football, American football, here we'll clarify, and start with the NFL, but not exclusively the NFL. Some interesting news coming out around, really what is going to be a giant issue for the National Football League going forward, and that's its exclusive rights to broadcast out-of-market games, essentially. Everyone knows we have network TV for your in-market games, and that's its own thing. But with the transientness of American life and the powers of digital distribution, people's desire and willingness to pay for out-of-market games is only probably increasing. Maybe we'll debate that. And DirecTV has had a stranglehold with the NFL on exclusive rights for that. But that seems to be shaky as they speed down the highway towards a September deadline on deciding how both parties will proceed. Steve, why don't you give some details that are more advanced than mine?
Yeah, okay. So the NFL has had a contract with DirecTV for forever, like a decade at least, in which the DirecTV is the exclusive provider of the NFL games package. Okay, and so there was a lawsuit about this. This has not been a hunky-dory marriage in any way, shape, or form. There was a massive lawsuit between the NFL and DirecTV over this thing, and DirecTV won the argument at the end of the day. Because the NFL wanted to get out of it, and again, they lost in court over this. So these parties have not been happy with each other for a long time. But the reason why this is an issue right now is that the NFL DirecTV contract provides the NFL has an opt-out in September of this year, September 2019, in which the NFL can get out of this contract with DirecTV. If they decline the opt-out or they don't act on the opt-out, then they're locked in with DirecTV until 2022. And so that is what's going on right now. And so it's when I say September, I mean it's the day before the first game. They have to decide this before the first game of the 2019 season. So the article we found on this, that's the best one, is from Sports Business Daily, dated June 17, 2019. It says NFL takes long view on Sunday Ticket. And what they mean by long view is that if they opt out of this thing, there's going to be a whole host of parties who want this package. And they could sell non-exclusive rights to a whole bunch of them. And the article mentions, what you mentioned off the air, Chris, the most interesting part is there's a whole bunch of streaming services that want this too. Amazon, ESPN Plus. I don't know what DAZN is.
It's a new startup. It's John Skipper, former head of ESPN.
Oh, okay. All right. So it'll be the John Skipper Coke and Football Network,
Sounds fun.
John Skipper, if you guys remember, claimed a coke habit was one of the reasons why he left ESPN, which I think is ludicrous, but regardless. So the option is basically, does the NFL want to sell this package to a whole bunch of providers, put it everywhere, or keep DirecTV? Now, DirecTV is not totally happy either, because DirecTV has complained that the package is not bringing in the subscribers that it used to have. Now, I don't know about you, Chris, but I have to think that the only reason DirecTV exists at all and has not gone completely out of business is this NFL package. I just can't imagine who would want to put a satellite dish on their house in today's day and age, but for the motivation of the NFL package. Maybe I'm wrong, but
no, I think that they're being pretty disingenuous there. I understand playing their version of hardball, I guess, but yeah, the only reason to have DirecTV is the NFL package, and I don't think it's necessarily a comment on the public's appetite for paying for out-of-market games, to say that whether they make the calculus as an individual that it's worth putting a satellite, on their home for. 5-7 years ago, the world was vastly different. That was you might make that decision now. That's a high bar for the consumer to have to jump over just for that, especially when anybody who's even semi-aware, and if you're semi-aware enough to purchase the product, what's going on, change is coming in some form soon. And by the way, you can illegally stream these games, so that reality is also shot up. So I think it's silly to say that that's a comment on the appetite for football, and it's the only thing they have to hang their hat on because their business model has completely cratered. So I think that's going to be hard for them to continue on because it's the only thing keeping them afloat, and because it's that life raft is losing air fast doesn't necessarily mean there's a comment on that customer base.
Yeah, and yeah, I agree with you there. The other interesting part of this thing is I didn't realize I don't have AT&T Uverse, in my house, and Chris, I know you subscribe, you've cut the cord. But AT&T has dropped the NFL Network and NFL Red Zone from Uverse completely, which is really, really interesting if you think about it. That means something's gone horribly wrong between the NFL and AT&T. The business negotiations have gone completely sideways between those two entities. I have to think that the NFL would much rather. I don't know about the economics of this because, what we do know is that this is a $1.5 billion a year thing. Okay. meaning that DirecTV is paying the NFL $1.5 billion per year, and always before they've made up for this with more subscribers. And I think, the writing on the wall here is that more people are illegally streaming these games, and getting this content through other means. And so DirecTV is saying we're not really recouping this $1.5 million anymore, which isn't surprising. I have to think that the NFL would much rather sell this to everybody. Much rather, much like the NBA and MLB has put their package on every possible system. You can buy an exclusive streaming only thing through MLB. The package I have in my house is through Xfinity, and it's called MLB Extra Innings. We get all the games that way because we're just baseball fans. The NBA has done the same thing. You have to think that the NFL would much rather sell to all sorts of people than they would just be locked into DirecTV. You'd have to think that.
I think one of the things that illegal streams and the reality of that, which is kind of the NFL's fault to a degree, because basically those illegal streams are all coming from the Sky Network, which is their licensing deal in the UK. So that just makes it easier to pirate. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But what streaming has really shown the NFL, legal streaming, is that exclusivity really doesn't hold the same weight that it did when the DirecTV NFL contract began and then was sustained. It's just not. There isn't that kind of cachet. There's other ways to get it, and so now the NFL would much rather be in the business of getting it in everywhere people want to pay, whether that's through their Apple TV, their Roku, all these different services. The exclusivity, and DirecTV's even saying we're willing to give up the exclusivity. That's one of their bargaining chips that they've put on the table, obviously for a reduced price on their end. But there's no allure business-wise or even just capital-wise, social capital-wise, about being exclusive with anything. It's not the culture and it's not the technology. So the NFL is antiquated with this already, and I think they're trying to play catch-up. And one of the best ways they could do to play catch-up is just say, negotiate 3 to 5 of these deals and just be ubiquitous.
Yeah, and I don't think they're intentionally antiquated. I mean, they're contractually locked in. Again, they litigated this 4 or 5 years ago, massive lawsuit, and they lost. So I think they saw the writing on the wall a long time ago, and they just lost. They have a contract. By the way, I mean, the other way is, the NFL has their NFL Game Pass. That we as the Hogstye Networks have a subscription to that. And they could easily stream the games through that, to the public also, because you can't stream them live. You can stream the radio broadcast live. You cannot stream the television broadcast live, obviously, because both probably the network contracts and the DirecTV contracts prevent that. But you can go back and grab them, after the games are over. There's all sorts of platforms. They could do that. They could have contracts with every cable provider, Comcast and Time Warner. They could go to Amazon. They could put it everywhere. And I bet you they could probably end up making more money than they are now, through an aggregate of all these services. So, I just have to believe that the NFL is probably. I don't have to believe anything. If I put my money on a bet on this, my bet is that the NFL will opt out of this. But like you said, they're going to want to have these contracts set up beforehand, even on an informal basis, maybe. But I have to think that they're probably going to opt out of this in September, which is good, it really and truly, because you're right. I mean, the world was different 10 years ago, and it was truly like, look, people, if you want to see your out-of-market game, this is it. You have to go put a satellite dish on your house. I just always refused to do that, and I missed a lot of Redskins games because of that. But before we had this site, I used to watch those illegal streams. I stopped once we had the site because it was too hard to watch, and we had to pay too close attention to the games. And so I've been in a whole lot of sports bars, since then. But once this contract's over, you can best believe I'm going to stream it somewhere, so I can stop doing the sports bar thing. So it's better for everybody if this contract goes away and this product is available on all sorts of platforms. Better for the world.
I agree. Full stop. Interesting. And I think DirecTV really stumbled here because, I have been, and I did my illegal streaming bit too, but it's a horrible experience, and you're also it's like exposing your computer to radiation.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't, as an analyst, a football analyst, I cannot watch those streams and get enough out of the game to make it worthwhile.
Yeah. So, but DirecTV, which I think if I decide, which I'm on the fence, if I decide to purchase because DirecTV does now have a web streaming version of their package. That's all you get. You don't get access to the rest of DirecTV. You just you get the NFL package. And I think if I buy it again this year, it'll be my 4th year, somewhere around in there.
That was a unique to New York City
right,
thing,
but their
though.
rollout of that has been horrible. Like, they should have just, like...
I mean, technologically it's been terrible?
Well, no, it's just like they did regions. No one knew if you could get it. It was very confusing. They could have... And the technology was there. That was not the issue, right? So if they had actually just been aggressive and come out with the same package that's available to me now, which I think is available nationwide, but I don't even know. If they'd have just had put their total company energy into doing that, heck, the NFL might even be less motivated to get away from it if that package, if that product was high quality, everyone knew how to get it, and it was as ubiquitous as as DirecTV was 10 or 15 years ago. Like, so their toe in the water, slowness to move, they while they had those rights, they should have been aggressive and actually just moving from the dish to the cloud.
Yeah, I agree, and because I would have done it. Because if you know anything about me, and Chris, you do, it's that I'd rather pull my fingernails out than go to a sports bar, because that's not my thing. I don't like it. I would much rather subscribe, and I think you kind of have to either be team cable or team cut the cord, because it's too expensive to do both. You can't subscribe to Hulu and Netflix, all these things, and cable unless you really want to spend a lot of money. But that's the one thing I would do. I would subscribe to DirecTV streaming service just to be able to sit in my house and watch these games and not have to go to the sports bar. So I would do it. I think there's a market for that, even for cable customers like me. I think there's a market for it, and they should absolutely do it. And Chris, I didn't even, before you told me that was a New York City package like a year ago, whenever we talked about this before on this show, I had no idea that was even a thing. They've done a terrible job on marketing that. Like you said, I'd never heard of that, and I pay way more attention to this stuff than your average consumer, for obvious reasons. So, yeah, I think DirecTV's been foolish about this. They should have that in every city.
Yeah,
all over the world.
Yeah, this would not be the conversation right now. Or at least they'd be in a different negotiating position at the very least.
Oh yeah.
Your aversion to sports bars notwithstanding, it is always interesting to think about the secondary and tertiary victims or winners from these kinds of things. And there's no doubt that it'll be a hit to sports bars, at least in the short term, because the package... I mean, the NFL package in bars and in the culture and the multiple TVs and the whole business model of that kind of sports bar, I mean, that's going to be hurt. They might figure out a way to, figure it out. But that's where the sort of like, the downstream implications of some of that, because that's been a huge thing over the last 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, some people love the scene and they're going to go do that, and more power to them. But there's also people like me who hate that stuff and are doing it literally only to go watch their favorite team. And 100% of those people are going to go home. It's then you're only going to have the people who like being in the bar scene anyway are going to do it. And so yeah, I think that hurts their business model. It's like all things, like economic tariffs have a downstream effect. For example, if you put a tariff on China, and we're not going to get political here, but just as an example, you put tariffs, the United States put tariffs on other countries, that has downstream effects and implications on a wide range of things, and same with this. If you eliminate the DirecTV package, you allow the NFL games to be streamed everywhere. That absolutely is going to have an effect on sports bars and probably other things that we're not even thinking of. But from the NFL perspective, they're not worried about sports bars. That's not their concern. They want to make more money. And I just have to think, if you go DirecTV is X, or streaming at a bunch of services X1 plus X2 plus X3 plus X4, you have to think the second half of that is more money for the NFL. I just have to think they could make it work better for them. You would think.
Yeah, I would. That would be my strong assumption.
I think I'll make a prediction now that I think if you could fast forward, I don't know, 5 years, I think DirecTV is going to be gone. I don't think they're even going to exist anymore.
I think if the NFL opts out in September, you might even accelerate that.
Yeah.
And to some degree, considering they're owned by AT&T, AT&T bought it basically to eventually pick over the carcass anyway.
Right.
So
it might not be 5 years.
Yeah,
though. It
I think
might be
it's
sooner than
faster.
that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they're going to go the way of Blockbuster. You know, like Blockbuster is gone because one, technology changed, and two, they didn't have the foresight to see it. You know, for those of you who don't remember this, Blockbuster had an opportunity to buy Netflix at a cut rate bargain, and they declined, saying, "Oh, our business model will never fail." You know, the classic go to Blockbuster on Friday night and go rent some movies for the family will never stop. Well, Blockbuster is literally gone from the face of the earth in the entirety today because they did not have the foresight to see what Netflix saw. You know, and personally, I think Netflix is getting to the point where their business model is about to go south also because they're spending way too much money on original content. You know, billions and billions of dollars, and now there's a whole bunch of competition that didn't exist when they started it. So that's a whole nother discussion itself. But this is DirecTV. DirecTV is Blockbuster Video Part 2. You know?
I would definitely agree. So that'll be interesting. We'll obviously track this because as we speed towards September, this story will only ramp up. Now, answer me this quickly, Steve, because
Okay.
I have this question,
Right.
and the audience might as well. Okay, let's say the NFL opts out, you know, the night before opening day or opening kickoff on the Thursday night game, I imagine. Does that doesn't affect the 2019 season, right? Like that all, you know, like that all stays, and you know, DirecTV still has exclusive rights, sort of status quo at least for the season.
I don't know. The contract between NFL and DirecTV is not public. You know, I've not read the contract because it's not out there in public, and the material we've read for this in preparation for this show does not explicitly talk about that. So I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if that means, you know, the opt-out is in September and then it stops after the 2019 season, or it means that moment it's gone. I don't know the answer to that. So we'll have to stay tuned and find out.
Because that's, you know, that would be
Important.
one heck of a scramble if it does like race the board, you know, the day before kickoff.
You have to think that's probably not the case.
Yeah, I would have to think that as well.
Yeah.
And if the NFL does decide to not opt out, to opt in, then they're locked in until they can't even
2022.
So, you know, like in today's culture and world, that's not a small amount of time.
Well, yeah, and the reason why they may do that is that the TV contracts come. The CBA and the TV contracts both run around that time, okay? You know, the CBA is 2021. The TV contracts, I think, are 2021 also. And so I think the reason why they may stay in it is they may just want to punt on this issue right now to have kind of a larger look at what they're going to do with their broadcast rights. If they're going to stay in, that's probably why. They just stay the status quo, because it's not like they're losing money. It's DirecTV that's losing money. The NFL's, you know, making money hand over fist on this, $1.5 billion a year. So if they opt in, it's going to be because they want to say, okay, if we can eliminate everything, we're starting over from ground zero with all broadcast rights, and let's design a whole new package with network TV, cable TV, streaming, all of that all at once. That would be the reason why they want to do it, because I don't know if they want to get locked into like Amazon streaming a package when in 2 years now, you know, they're going to renegotiate everything. So that would be the reason why they stay in it, you know.
Yeah.
So
it'll be fascinating, and we have a deadline for when we will know.
Yep.
As does everyone involved. Well, we're going to move from a football league that is operational to a football league that is not operational, and that is, of course, the AAF, which we have chronicled many times on the show. But some interesting new developments, and probably, you know, these are some developments in terms of the technology that they had pioneered or attempted to pioneer. That might be the only interesting thing that's keeping this at the top of our heads. So, Steve, why don't you give us a look at what MGM is doing here, and then we'll talk about some of the implications.
Okay, so we got to go back in the Wayback Machine to explain the whole thing. And just incidentally, this story really shows just how moronic the people who ran the Arena League or the AAF really are. I mean, their stupidity when it comes to business issues is just highlighted more and more every time something comes out about this former league. It just makes me shake my head. So, what happened was back in September, MGM paid $7 million for a secured interest in the technology behind the AAF's gambling app. And so the idea here, the AAF actually did come up with a whole bunch of new innovations with regarding real-time streaming of data, the idea being you can bet on a whole bunch of other things. And so that was a big part of their business model. And now obviously it fell apart spectacularly. But the day after the MGM bought a secured interest in that, literally the next day, the league folded. Okay, and so then they filed bankruptcy on April 17th. And so now MGM had a secured claim in the bankruptcy. And so what happened here is that in exchange for purchasing the app and the technology behind the app, MGM reduced its secured claim from $7 million to $5 million, and then they paid $125,000 in cash. So in effect, they gave up $2.125 million in value in exchange to own the rights to this app. And now, don't expect the MGM to just revive the AAF gambling app because that has no value. What they're going to do is take the technology and use the technology and a whole bunch of other things. Don't forget, the MGM has contracts with multiple leagues now, okay? And so we are going to see they've got contracts with Major League Baseball, the NBA, and Major League Soccer for whatever that's worth. Much less, obviously. So they're going to use the technology in the gambling app, which truly was forward-thinking. And AAF spent $40 million on this. And they're going to use that in their gambling services for all the other leagues. So that's what it's about. So they just basically scooped up $40 million in technology for a cut rate price. So, good on them.
Yeah, this is going to be one of those things. I mean, the AAF was, by any metric, a spectacular failure, and especially a spectacular failure compared to the old American Basketball Association, which was actually a successful league until it merged. But it's real with the NBA. It's really fascinating that there are little innovations that the modern fan of the NBA would have no idea, like something like the 3-point line or some of these other things that kind of came from those leagues. And our time scale is so much faster today with how things go. But how they were thinking not only about gambling but the gamification of these sports. Bringing things to your phone, bringing things to your computer, more interactivity. The AAF and their tech, by the way, obviously are far away from getting that right. But if you look at the innovation cycles, you look at the people investing in it, you look at a sort of Silicon Valley mindset, which doesn't mind burning through capital and companies and human resources to sort of advance, and people that are making larger bets. The stuff that AAF was attempting to do for gambling and just fan engagement in general, in terms of player tracking, in terms of, Steve, you mentioned you guys have NFL Pass, so one of the things I think you can have on there is
MLB.
No, I'm saying with the Hog side, you have the NFL Network.
Oh, yeah, correct.
And you get sometimes you get you can watch like the little ball go on the little grit, digital football field. Don't they have some of those things where it kind of follows the play to a degree? Like it'll say like the Minnesota Vikings are at the 30-yard line or whatever if you click onto an individual game.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. I mean, the NFL Game Pass is a kind of after the game thing, and we have it because we're watching the coach's film. But yeah, I think that's more of a red zone deal.
Maybe so. But imagine, and so what the technology was attempting to do was imagine that those digital characters were actually with zero latency, which that basically means no delay from the action on the field to the digital avatar on your computer screen or your phone. That's pretty remarkable, and that was the big bet that they were trying to make with this, which has lots of implications. Gambling is the most obvious one, of the most you can make money off the quickest, but in terms of actually keeping fans engaged, changing generations, the gamification in general, the kind of esports mentality. They were making some big bets on this technology that probably won't see fruition probably in some ways for years. And, the smart engineer, somebody who's able to connect the dots, will reference the code base, the thinking to, this whatever half season of AAF.
Yeah, I mean, at one point, Charlie Ebersol was talking about tracking players' biometrics, for this. And I mean, for me personally, all this kind of offends me a little bit. Not offends me. I just don't really like it. I'm not a sports gambler. To me, it kind of ruins the purity of the game. And so having all this gambling stuff involved, for me, just is a bit distasteful for me. But I understand the money of it. We're all about business. And so, yeah, I think the AF was very forward-looking. I think it made a really pretty apt comparison to the ABA and the NFL and the NBA as to what the AAF could have been to the NFL. Because, yeah, some of this stuff is really forward-leaning. Much like the three-point shot made a huge impact on the game. The stuff with gambling, that the real-time streaming of gambling is probably the future. As much as I don't like it, just personally don't like it, that's clearly the future, and it's clearly going to get more and more and more and more. And so the AF, they clearly bit off way more than they could chew. They weren't capitalized. They didn't have management involved that could do all this. But the idea of taking real-time streaming data and parlaying that into every aspect of the NFL is something that's coming. And MGM just scooped up the technology for a relative pittance. Because let me tell you, I mean, $2.125 million is nothing. Nothing for this. That's the chump change. And so, I think the MGM probably just became the leader. In the leader in the clubhouse about for gambling, sports gambling.
And
clearly,
you mentioned it earlier, but they've been, and we've covered this on the show. They've been drip over the last probably about 3 years, signing, with the NHL, with I think NASCAR. They've been, shoring up all of those other sporting leagues. So, they're going to have quite an ecosystem, avail to them. And to your point, like, they basically are paying, we'll even round up just for the sake of, easier math and give them a little bit of benefit of the doubt. But they basically they're going to end up paying around $3 million for what ended up was a $40 million investment. Yeah. That's good leverage, no matter, any kind of, anything about leveraged buyouts, or even if you know anything about, shopping at Marshall's, that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, they went to the going out of business sale and bought a carpet for it was a $500 carpet for $50.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what they did. When Joe's Carpet in your local strip mall goes out of business, this is what the AF did. And let me just be clear. I mean, it's not me being a prude about it. It's just not my thing. What really worries me about this infusion of gambling isn't the corruption of society so much, because if you want to bet, go have at it. It's not my thing, but do you. But my fear of this is that it's going to become so important to these leagues that it's going to invade the sanctity of the game. And what I mean by that is, 40 years ago now, Pete Rose got in big trouble for betting on the Cardinals, right? Or not the Cardinals, the Cincinnati Reds. If gambling is going to be maybe the biggest financial driver of these sports for a bunch of parties, who's to say the game is going to remain pure, and not and who's to say that instead of just having Pete Rose bet on the Reds, that there's not going to be widespread corruption into this. That's my fear of it. It's not really so much that I'm so much of a prude that I don't want people to bet. Again, you do you, but I'm just afraid that if you get so in bed with gambling that it's real. People already think the NBA is corrupt. Okay, and the NBA was corrupt to a certain extent, and like the refs, what was the name of that ref? Him. I mean, he was corrupt, and he was fixing games for bad people. He did it a couple times, and my Lakers might have been a beneficiary of that. Which is unfortunate, but I'll take it. But my point is, if it just seems to me that it's ripe for bad to happen to the game itself, and that's my fear with all this gambling stuff. I mean, I'm looking forward like a decade.
Well, all you got to do is look at the state of college sports. Well, really, Major League, not Major League, college football and men's basketball. Yeah. And obviously men's football. But that's probably where that will land, right? Because the economics of it are so out of whack that's your mark, so to speak. They'll be much easier to move, and the action from the gambling standpoint will probably be close enough to the pro leagues, maybe in some cases more. So we think about things like March Madness and things like that. That's where the nefarious actors will target for that kind of fixing.
Yeah, I mean, and if you don't think nefarious actors aren't going to get involved in this, you haven't been paying attention to society for the past millennium. It is going to happen. It will happen. There's no doubt. And these sports leagues in the NCAA, which is a professional sports league in and of itself, they're going to have to take much greater precautions to ensure that the game remains pure. And what I mean by pure is not corrupt. And they're going to fail at it. Because usually the bad people are a step ahead of the good people.
Well, when you have that percentage of labor which is unpaid, and someone's dangling money in front of them,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, who's the running back for Iowa or whatever, who's making no money at all? I'm just making Iowa up, but pick your university. If people are poised to make billions, they're going to dangle a lot of money in that front running back, and one of these guys is going to take it. One of these guys will absolutely take it. And that's my fear. And my fear is we're just going to have we're going to have sports leagues that aren't at all what they are today. And that's what I don't really want to see. So that's my problem with this. It's not so much that, I mean, Chris, we always joke about it. You're kind of pro-vice, and you and I, we're way on the other ends of the circle when it comes to this stuff a lot of times, but we do kind of meet in the middle on sort of the live free or die thing that you mentioned earlier, with the exception of drugs, which is another matter. I don't really want the government to tell me what to do either. So, yeah, you do you. If you guys want to gamble. I'm just afraid that it's going to corrupt these sports in a way that we have never seen. And, we may lose it. If it's all about gambling and money, I just don't know if these leagues are going to be the same. Fast forward 15 years from now. And that's what I really don't like.
Yeah, no matter how you enter and what your opinions are, if you don't think that that's a possibility, a concern, something to defend against, etc., you're insane. That's how the world works. For every market, there's a black market.
And like I said, the bad guys usually are a step ahead of the good guys when it comes to stuff like this. They may catch up ultimately, but like performance enhancing drugs in the NFL is a good example. Like these guys were doing this stuff back into the 70s, and it took 20 years to catch up to them. And even now, who knows if they are caught up? And that's what's going to happen with this gambling stuff.
Yeah, and it's not like any of the players are using Lyle Alzado steroids at this point, right? The science,
no. Yeah, way ahead.
Right. The one interesting thing, and we'll probably move on, but the one, if you look in hindsight, the real mistake for, I guess we'll just call Ebersol, and he'll be kind of a, proxy for everybody who was in on the AAF. The real mistake they made was don't start a league. Just do a typical Silicon Valley innovation thing and raise enough capital to make the NFL license its stuff for you to do all your, that would have been hard, no doubt, and it would have been expensive. But that would have been the much more interesting play and ultimately probably a much better return on your money. And even if it didn't work with licensing the NFL, you would have probably been able to sell your tech at at close to what it was worth without having to build a football league.
Yeah, I think these guys bit off more than they can chew. Obviously, they bit off more than they can chew. And I think this is probably what happens when you put a bunch of football guys into business. They really needed somebody who's not an entertainment or sports guy, some billionaire business guy who could really see the whole picture to really do it right. Yeah, you know, and because they put so much of their, you know, so much of their eggs into the gambling basket. You're right about that. They could have won if they took this technology and kind of parlayed it and sold it to a bunch of leagues. They could have won without having to build a football league. You're exactly right about it. I hadn't really thought about that before you said it, but that's exactly right. They could have done that and made money, but I just think you have like guys like Ebersol and Bill Polian was involved in this thing. Those guys think they're so smart because they're smart about football, but they're kind of babes in the woods when it comes to major big-time business, and they prove that wholeheartedly, you know.
Yeah.
And they got played by that Kaplan guy who owns the Hurricanes. He was a ruthless businessman, dude. You know, he just absolutely pulled the plug, and the owners of the AF just utterly failed to see that that was a possibility because they are novices. They are not big business. They were football guys and entertainment guys first and foremost, and they just got played. They could have taken this technology and done something else with it. You're exactly right. And they just lost it for pennies.
Right. They couldn't even, yes. So, interesting story. We'll probably revisit again and again, and then we'll have our next version of that once whenever the Pro Wrestling Football League rolls out.
XFL.
Yeah. So we're going to switch off of football here, but also kind of continue to take a look at wacky or interesting innovations within our traditional sports leagues. And that is that the NBA has, this week, I think, started to make some odd signals about the willingness to really mess with their season. Less games, some bizarre tournaments in the middle of it, even messing around somewhat with their playoff format. Now, we're a long way from it. This is not like, coming anytime soon. But to open up this can of worms and to signal that you're willing to think about messing with your core, which is really your core business model, which is games, right? Is pretty fascinating. So I can't even get my head fully around what they want to do. It's easy to say they might want to reduce games, but it seems like to me their alternatives also sort of add games. They're just different styles of games.
Yeah, I think that Adam Silver was passing the peyote around in a big circle when they came up with these ideas. Okay, so if you guys want to look this up, this is on ESPN, and the name of the article is Sources NBA Talks Fewer Games In-Season Event by Kevin Arnovitz, June 26, 2019. And this was all over the place, but this is what we're reading here. And just be clear, they're just talking about ideas right now. This is not something that's going to be implemented necessarily next year. But the big idea, which to me makes less than, if there's a bar of less than no sense, that can be, you could say that's where we are with this. So what they want, the idea here that they're NBA is kicking around is to reduce the number of games in the regular season and then put a mid-season tournament in to make up for the income. And so the idea here basically is, you save the health of these players, because at the end of the season, the LeBron Jameses of the world are sitting out half the games anyway to prepare for the playoffs. And he didn't make the playoffs this year, but you get my point. And so the idea here is that you cut off the total number of games to save the health of the players and make it better for everybody, but then to make up the income, you have a tournament.
Yeah.
Now, the problem with that is that the tournament is utterly meaningless, okay? The tournament, newsflash, the tournament has no value or meaning whatsoever, and if you want to create some, like, Major League Baseball all-star game, gimmick, that it means something, that's what it is, it's a gimmick, okay? Because you could have something, just a spitball, you could have this like, the winner of the tournament is an automatic berth in the playoffs and an automatic bye or something. You could do something like that, but that's a gimmick, ultimately. So the reason why they've kicked around this tournament is the collective bargaining agreement between the NBA and the NBA Players Association says that the NBA has to try to increase revenue, not decrease revenue. And if you decrease the number of games that are broadcast, the revenue from the broadcast rights decreases and everybody makes less money. And so they're trying to figure out a way to keep all these players in every game, because what this is born out of, like the Spurs, Greg Popovich used to, not only did he bench good players like Manu Ginobili and Tim Duncan, they used to send them home. They were like weren't even in the arena. They would put them on planes as they go home, and that really ticked off the NBA because people come to the arena, and they want to see Tim Duncan. They want to see the Hall of Famer, and not only is he not playing, he's not even on the bench. He's like at home on a couch. And that really irritated the NBA to the point where they were kicking around rules about when you could bench players who weren't injured. And that's ultimately not going to work. So this is kind of a way of thinking about how to solve that problem in a way that's going to make them more money. The problem is the idea of a tournament is just beyond stupid, I think. I see no value. I think it's a complete gimmick. It has no value whatsoever.
Well, also,
may God have mercy on your soul.
Kevin Durant blowing out his Achilles in the midwinter tournament?
Useless tournament. Yeah, exactly.
I mean...
Yeah, because if you've ever played sports at any kind of level, basketball and baseball both are tournament stuff. You're gonna go out and you're gonna play. For me, it's baseball. You're gonna go out and play 3 games a day, and that's just how it is. And you don't get away from that till you get to college, really, And so if you're gonna have NBA teams play a tournament where it's going to be back-to-back games, which is what any tournament has to be, you're going to greatly increase the chance for injury. And yeah, you're going to have Kevin Durant or whoever, pick your star, if they blow out their knee, that's going to be the end of the tournament.
Yeah.
So I just think this surely somebody's going to come to their senses and not do this. Isn't the answer easy? I can't believe they increased the length of the season by a couple weeks. Spread the games out a tiny bit. Would anybody complain about a longer basketball season? I don't think so. Excuse me. I don't think so. I think, you back it up a couple weeks because the NBA starts in November?
Yeah.
I mean, you're in primetime TV, right, in November. You started in October. You're still in primetime TV, time frame. And just spread the games out a little bit. You have your 82 games, and you just play them over a longer period of time. You could still have games on every night, but the teams get more of a break.
Yeah, then you reduce the back-to-backs, which is because this idea that this is about player safety, is such a crock. We talk about this a lot with the NFL, but because they use that, and that's often part of the whatever conversations for however they want to tweak the sport. Usually, very cynically. So. And I'm going to tag that on the NBA here, too. This idea that this is somehow about player safety. First of all, injuries happen preseason whenever. Like, this idea that, you had 2 Warriors go down in the finals is not because it's a long season or whatever. That could have happened at any time. Like, you can blow out your ACL. It wasn't because it was Game 7 or whatever, So this idea, that's silly. And I completely agree. If you actually elongate the season, not games played, but the season, so that you eliminate the back-to-backs and the kind of 3 games in 5 nights, which, yes, those are the things that probably do have an impact on the players' bodies. But then you say, oh, we don't want to see our superstars go down, in the late playoffs, and it's a grind. Okay, but then you're going to add not only some kind of weird college basketball style, mid-season tournament, but they're also talking about play-ins for the 8th spot, almost like a little bit what they've done in March Madness. There's 2 things they're actually talking about adding games. So this idea that this is about player safety is comical.
It's about money. It's about money. I mean, you could still have basketball on every night of the week. With elongating the season. You just wouldn't have your team playing, 4 games a week. You reduce that to 3 games a week, eliminate all the back-to-backs. You could still have all the drama of the regular season. Now, the public complains that the NBA regular season doesn't have meaning sometimes, because of the way the playoffs are structured. But, I mean, I think that's just the people who aren't the basketball fans. I mean, the regular season has value in that you just want to watch basketball. I don't buy that argument. So it seems to me that that's the best thing. I just think a mid-season tournament is it can't not be a gimmick. It is a gimmick. It's going to be a gimmick. There's no way to do it and have it not be gimmicky and dumb. Because anything like you were talking about, like a play into the 8th spot, give somebody home field advantage, anything like that, it feels like a gimmick. Because then you have somebody at the end of the season who hasn't earned that 8th spot, but is going to have it because they won some tournament back in February or whatever. I don't get it, and I just think it's a bad idea all around, and it's much too complicated, to do this. Much too complicated, and I don't think. I mean, TV wouldn't mind having more basketball, having a longer season. Real basketball fans wouldn't mind because they get to watch basketball longer. So I don't get it. I just can't believe this is going to happen.
Yeah, and I think some of it's just floating trial balloons to see what the conversation says and get things. I like the idea that they can think a little bit crazy and out of the box. I'm not going to knock them for that as a big idea.
Absolutely.
But these ideas, are kind of silly.
They aren't it.
Yeah,
they aren't it. It's really like the article talks about length and density. It's the density is what the problem is. The density of the schedule is what causes Greg Popovich to sit Tim Duncan and Tony Parker. It's not 82 games. It's the density in which it's the time period in which 82 games are played. If you could space them out, Tim Duncan would have played every game because you want Tim Duncan in. Tim Duncan's a great player. You want him playing every game, but Popovich was just thinking ahead in terms of playoffs. So it seems to me that's the easy answer rather than creating some nonsense tournament that's going to be derided and made fun of.
And he was obviously right, because how many world championships did the San Antonio Spurs win under Popovich?
Yeah, 5. Right. So, 5.
So
I think.
It worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could elongate the bench. You could add 2 players, which would obviously, not be fiscally, smart necessarily. So there's lots of things you could do. So we'll go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that the elongating the bench is just going to be an expense for no payoff because the guys in the bench are going to be G League guys, and you're not going to increase revenue through that.
No. I'm saying you could,
and it's all,
you could more strategically sit your stars and still have them play.
Yeah, but that's a cost without without more income. So,
I'm just saying if you cared about player safety, there's lots of things.
Which they don't. Yeah. No. Does anybody actually think that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
How about go to 5-game opening round playoff series? There's only to be 7 games.
You haven't been listening to this show for very long, and you think anybody cares about player safety.
So I guess it's the NFL's relieved. Someone else gets to use that head fake. Yeah. All right, so we're going to one last kind of wacky innovation in the world of American pro sports, or North American pro sports, I guess. And that is baseball. The Tampa Bay Devil Rays. Are they just the Rays now? I can't keep track.
They're the Rays. Yeah, they dumped Devil.
And their owner, Stuart Sternberg, he basically, well, first of all, they're a very unsuccessful franchise that no one cares about in their home market. That's a given. That's like air. And then, and he's been trying with great futility to get somebody to build him a new stadium. And even though everyone agrees that their current stadium is a garbage pit and no one cares and it's not conveniently located, even if there were fans, which there are not, he can't get any of that done. So he started to float the idea, and I guess baseball has allowed him to explore it. There is some official. It's not just like somebody the wacky owner saying something. There is some official validation to split time between Tampa Bay and old market Montreal in Canada, of course, and sort of do almost like a snowbird routine. You play your when it's warm in Montreal, you're playing in Montreal. And when it's cooler and you play your winter and late spring games in Florida, so you basically do what many Canadians do and have a dual existence in the cold and warm environments when it's best to be there. This is and the Union actually, this came out a couple weeks ago, but the Union, I think just a few days ago, basically must have been concerned enough that this had gained some momentum with the endorsement of Major League Baseball that they said, hey, we've got to be at least consulted and get our approval for this to go forward.
Yeah, look, just move.
Yeah.
Just move to Montreal, for God's sakes, or somewhere else. Okay, so if you want to read about this, there's a story in the Tampa Bay Times, which is dated June 20th. It's called Rays to Explore Splitting Home Games with Montreal. And what you're talking about, Chris, is that Major League Baseball has given the Rays permission to explore the possibility of splitting their home games between Tampa Bay and Montreal. And nobody's going to say that the Tampa Bay has been successful in any way in its home market. Like you said, they're invisible. Nobody cares. Their attendance is some of the worst in baseball. And so the owner's like desperately trying to figure out how to have any income at all, from ticket revenue. And so that's kind of what this is about. Again, it's about money. This is about the owner trying to get people in the stands somewhere, somehow. My answer to that again is just move. I mean, splitting. I don't know how you get fans interested. Aren't you? If you do this, aren't you going to lose whatever market you have left in Tampa? If you take half the home games away from the fans in Tampa, aren't they going to care half as much?
Yeah, and it's not
I don't understand.
You're not splitting time in Tuscaloosa. Well, that's Alabama. You're not splitting time. You're not splitting time.
Well, it's like the Green Bay Packers used to play a game in Milwaukee.
They used to play 4 games, I think. Yeah.
Still the home market, all of that. If you could take, the Rays and play a few games in, I don't know, Orlando.
Yeah.
If say. That would probably be okay because it's still a Florida thing. But you're talking about Montreal, and you're not just talking about 1 out of 16 games. They're talking about splitting all of the home games. So there's 81 home games a year. It's a 162-game season. So you're talking about playing 40 games in Canada.
In Montreal, which is even its own thing within Canada. So it's
which
so
also,
bizarre.
by the way, failed. They lost the Expos. It's not like that's a great market.
Right. So, and the NFL's tried this actually twice, or teams in the NFL. Obviously, Green Bay, which they stopped doing. And then a couple years ago, you might remember the Buffalo Bills did something similar, and they played, I think, maybe 3 home games in Toronto or some, and they quickly moved away from that. And those were at least in regional. Those are obviously regional markets, like you were saying. So this and. They use the excuse, there's a lot, and there are a lot of Canadian transplants that go to Florida. There are the snowbird culture. That's not enough to build a sports franchise around. And also, you can probably safely assume that a high percentage of them aren't, you're making a lot of assumptions about what they want to do with their free time.
Yeah. And and the other team that's kind of contemplating this is the Jacksonville Jaguars. They've signed up. They've played multiple games in London, and I think the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars is a guy named Khan. His last name is Khan. I'm going to butcher his first name. I can't remember it, but Khan. And Jacksonville's a terrible NFL market. And so he's trying to figure out how to make money. And so his grand idea was to sign up for a bunch of London games. Again, that's a limited deal. They're talking about playing half the season in Montreal. And I don't blame Montreal, I guess, for trying. The Montreal, is just trying to bring baseball back. And, okay, I get it. But this is a good way to destroy any market you have, because you're also not going to build up too much fan interest in Montreal if you're going to play half a season. If the Tampa Bay Rays are going to play 40 games in Montreal, it's not going to be the Montreal Expos Part 2. It's going to be the Tampa Bay Rays. You're never going to build up a home culture of the home team in Montreal for a team that's just like wintering, in Canada. So this is like the worst of both worlds, seems to me. And he's whatever small amount of interest you have, you're destroying it in both places.
And also I find if one of the prime motivators for this is his inability to get a stadium built in Tampa Bay, which I would assume
you're going to reduce the income by a half.
And I assume he still probably would want a new stadium in Tampa Bay, even under this split time. So now you're going to try to get 2 stadiums built when you can't get 1 built?
Why? And if you're going to abandon Tampa for half the season, they're for sure not going to build you any stadium.
Yeah. So it.
How about this? How about build a better product?
Yeah.
And get fans interested in Tampa. Put a team on there that's a World Series contender.
Yeah.
How about that?
The Marlins, which are also a mess and have similar problems, at least they've won 2 World Series, I think, in their history.
Yeah. And of course, the owner sold got rid of every player on the team after that. But Tampa Bay,
no history.
The Rays, no history basically at all. They've made the playoffs a couple times here or there, but no history at all. My advice again would either be to just move. There's other cities that could use Major League Baseball. Like how about Charlotte? Is there I'm just all spitballing. Is there a market? Charlotte has got a football team that's successful. They have a basketball team that Michael Jordan has kind of screwed up, but that's a major sports market. There's other markets. If you don't like Tampa, move. But the idea of splitting between 2 markets, that are on opposite sides of North America makes less than no sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. Just move, and no one would care. Florida wouldn't care. Tampa Bay wouldn't care.
No.
Major League Baseball wouldn't care. And there's a
Major League Baseball might applaud
Yeah.
it because you've driven attendance.
yeah. I mean, it is a that, and there are tons of heck, if you want to move, Vancouver, which doesn't even which
there's
doesn't
another
even get
one.
that cold. So you don't.
Well, of course, I mean, and that may be the Seattle Mariners' home market.
Oh, that's true. But still,
Yeah,
I mean,
but there's
more
other teams.
distance
But
than
there's
East
other
Coast teams that are they're further away than Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York, and
Yeah.
Boston.
You could, I mean, Salt Lake City. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of markets. Point is, there's a bunch of made pro sports size markets out there that you don't have to go through this nonsense. I think this is this guy's brainchild, and he hasn't really thought this through at all.
Well,
He's
He's obviously not a talented owner.
no, clearly not. You have an unsuccessful team, and you're going to try a spectacularly stupid idea, which is going to, reduce interest in your team even farther. Congratulations.
And one day these pro sports teams will realize that you cannot oversaturate Florida. It just does not. I know it's got many big cities and it has a large populace, but it just does not support in any sport the level of franchises that people try to place in that state.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. I hope, I don't care one way or another. I'm not a Rays fan, but I'm going to be watching this just to see what happens because it's just fascinating it's fascinating to me how very rich people could do really stupid things sometimes.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, how they got there. So everyone quickly Google Stuart Sternberg and see, how he got in a fiscal place to even be making these bad decisions. I think with that brings us to the end of our topics, right, Steve?
Yeah, that brings us to the end.
All right, Steve, you want to do the Hogsty Network spiel? What's going on interesting in the Hogsty world?
Okay, Seasons of Discontent is on hiatus for a couple weeks. Rick Snyder dared to take a vacation to Europe, Eastern Europe, and so that will be back on July 23rd. The Hogsty show is still going strong, doing, the weekly show. That will transition to 2 shows a week when the season starts, and then we've got written content every day. We're kind of in the slow season right now for football, but we're continuing to put out great content in spite of that. So lots is going on.
And why don't you give Jamal's YouTube series, which I know I heard you do a good full-throated endorsement of on the Hogsty proper, but that's really taken off.
Yeah. Okay. So Jamal has been putting together lots of great YouTube videos, YouTube breakdowns on players. He's getting ready to start into some top 5 type things. The latest one that came out this week was in our 2-minute warning series. He did top 5 most important players for the Redskins. This has gotten a lot of good attention. He broke down Dwayne Haskins. He did who did he do? Kelvin Harmon, I believe. And we're going to see lots more of those. So head over to our YouTube channel to check out a lot of great stuff.
And yeah, training camp will be here very soon at this point, realistically. All right, so you can hit the show at Just Business Pod on Twitter. You can find me at ChrisLarry33. And Steve is often at the helm of the Hogsty handle.
Yes, often, but not always. I do not have my own Twitter.
That's right. He's a man of mystery. So we will see you in 2 weeks' time. Until then, keep thinking about that money.